Estas são Conversas Fora de Moda, um podcast do Beat para perceber como o setor têxtil e a moda estão a ficar mais amigos do ambiente através da bioeconomia.
Olá a todos, sejam muito bem-vindos às Conversas Fora de Moda. Hoje temos um episódio bastante fora do nosso habitual. Estaremos a falar sobre moda sustentável, sobre as grandes questões que assolam este tópico com duas players internacionais. São elas Kaleigh Tirone Nunes e ainda Marina Testino. Esta conversa será em inglês e pedimos desde já desculpa caso alguma das nossas ouvintes se sinta excluído. Hi, how are you? I was just apologizing already because we're conducting this episode in English in case someone is feeling left out or excluded from the conversation. So, hi Kaleigh, hi Marina, welcome.
Thank you.
We're about to start talking about a very difficult subject, I think, and I may assume, which is the exclusivity surrounding and concerning sustainable fashion or a more sustainable fashion. Who would like to go first with some considerations?
So I think maybe as a first step, it would be interesting to kind of define for us in the conversation what we deem as sustainable. This is actually a point that a lot of people in talks like to make, but I do think it's relevant here because sustainability can be seen from different perspectives. So if we look from the perspective of you want garments to have as low impact as possible throughout the supply chain. So let's say low water consumption, low carbon emissions, energy efficiency, no toxins or harmful chemicals, and then products that do no harm to people, animals, or living beings. So, raw materials that are developed and extracted with low impact, a minimal supply chain trajectory, and locally produced and sold garments. As much as possible, but then that can enter back into the supply chain by being repaired, reused, resold, and eventually recycled. Now, ideally, we would have this all in the same region. We can make an analogy, for example, to agriculture, where we're saying, like in agriculture, you want something local, you want it organic, you want, regenerative produce that's free from toxins, you want minimal travel miles to keep nutrients, and you want the people who are making this to be happy and being paid a living wage. But of course, fashion's supply chain is much more complex than this, or can be much more complex. So achieving this kind of local vision at scale isn't as easy to achieve. Let's say in Portugal, for example, we don't have local production of raw material. We have to import, although we have a big textile industry, raw material is something very difficult to develop at scale internally in our country. So it's a tough mission to achieve in this sense. What's my point here? The point is, you can do a lot by doing very little. So I don't think sustainability is just, some high-end fashion brand doing, creating and developing accessible products that are cheap but are deemed sustainable. What I mean is, the less you use, the more you repair, the more you buy something that already exists, you can actually be very sustainable at a low cost by getting creative and by looking at the details and supporting your local environment. I don't know, Marina, what do you think?
What do you reckon?
I completely agree with you. I think there's so many angles to what it means to be sustainable and so many things to take into consideration that's also what it makes it difficult for people wanting to be in this space, because there's no Bible, there's no place to start and kind of read the instructions, follow 1, 2, 3, and go ahead and do it. So I actually, with all the brands that I work with, create these 5 pillars of what it means to be sustainable. And it's looking at these 5 things: sustainably sourced materials, social responsibility, transparency, responsible production and resources and waste management. And in kind of when I work with brands, I really see that you at least need to be tackling two of these things. And from there you can grow up and you can do better. But really seeing these 5 pillars and figuring out, okay, which ones can I start tackling? Which ones are easier? Which ones am I more knowledgeable? Which ones are less expensive for me to start there and then build up from there? And then again, as you were saying, there's obviously the material side, but there's also like how buying more conscious materials and biodegradable and natural and new technologies. But there's also this idea of like, okay, there's so much fabric already produced. There's dead stock, there's offcuts, there's so many things that just using creativity, we can include them within the industry, the loop, and close the loop and really extend the life of the pieces, and instead of them ending up in landfill.
Yeah. So one of thank you for saying that you work directly with brands, because this podcast and what we've been trying to achieve here is a sort of a breakdown to the consumer. When the consumer wants to consume, one of the first barriers is the price tag. And luckily, we have you and Kaleigh talking about how you can creatively impact and have a better impact on what you're trying to achieve, starting with the pillars, trying to make a little breakdown of what you can do, of what is out of your reach, of what is your next goal and your next step. Uh, can can this transcend through the pillars, of course? Can it transcend the barriers, the initial barriers for the regular consumer to start aiming for a more sustainable way to consume? And then we'll go to the brand side, I think.
I've almost been a decade in the sustainable fashion space, and my whole thing has been to disprove that, to really disprove this idea that sustainable fashion is expensive, and at the same time disprove the idea that sustainable fashion is grungy and it's for the people that are in nature and love
Yeah.
yoga. And so really these two opposites. And how I've done that was creating these campaigns where I showcased how sustainable fashion can be fun, can be sexy, can be colorful, and can be fashionable. And one campaign that I specifically targeted to talk about how sustainable fashion doesn't mean that it has to be expensive was called Yellow Like a Lemon. So I wore yellow outfits every day for 2 months, all sustainable outfits. And I created the 4 S's of sustainable fashion: simplify, share, sustainably source, and secondhand. So based on these 4 S's, it's how you can change your wardrobe to be more conscious. Sharing. Instead of buying something new, go to your friend's house, borrow something, go to your sister's, go to your mom. Um, Renting also is an option. If you're going to a wedding, if you're going to a party, instead of buying something new, rent something for that occasion. And then secondhand, and then obviously sustainable brands that are more expensive. But there's so many options before you go to buying something new, of buying something used, or borrowing something. And so I basically, so that was the part of the activation of showcasing how it doesn't need to be expensive to be more conscious. And then the part of like sustainable fashion isn't grungy was wearing yellow. So I did all this from different rented companies, borrowed pieces, sustainable brands wearing yellow outfits for 2 months, and launched the campaign during Paris Fashion Week. So I was in all the shows, all the parties, head to toe in yellow, head to toe in sustainable yellow. And I've done these campaigns throughout my career to really disprove this idea that sustainable fashion is not cool, or it's too expensive, or it's not colorful, or it's not sexy, or it's not inclusive within the fashion industry. So yeah, so I really like to go against that idea that like, oh, I can't, it's too expensive, it's too difficult. But it's not. It takes a bit more time to learn and change your mindset, to get your closet more conscious. But once you do it, it's actually cheaper.
It is. Um, Thank you for that, and thank you also for the yellow part, because I'm a very big fan of yellow. Is my favorite color. Kaleigh, do you agree that the average person can actually manage a normal life, like an office life, or just a regular 9 to 5 life? With this knowledge and really trying to work out a sustainable campaign, or being a part or participating in a sustainable movement um, throughout clothes, but also managing to skip what is expected to be done. Like you need a shirt or you need a formal attire, and you go and you just go out shopping and you buy a fast fashion one because it's easier, and because you don't need to go and search and try it on and see if it fits and see if it needs some extra, I don't know, a fitting or anything else. Do you think it's possible for everyone to engage in this kind of practices?
I do think there's something to say between the reality of maybe living in Lisbon or living in New York City. I do think that while living in Lisbon, for example, or in Portugal in general, we have much more access to repairing or tailoring at a much cheaper price than we do in New York City. But then I think that in New York, we have much more access to secondhand or rental programs than we do in Lisbon. So I think the perspective or the approach has to be slightly adjusted to the places that we are. But I do think it's fully possible. And I do want to add that I think Marina's account of her past decade in her career and doing the work that she's been doing is a great example of how sustainability is scaling as well in the fashion industry, or at least this not only the concept, but also the innovation associated within sustainability is scaling. Because if we think about the time it takes for innovation to integrate into our mainstream, let's say, and innovation can mean, a concept of secondhand being mainstream. It can also mean, a new fiber, innovative fiber, or a dye being accessible for large, let's say, mass market brands to integrate into their supply chain. Because thinking, synthetic fabrics, for example, took 30 years to dominate fashion. That was the time span of innovation. Or electric vehicles are still scaling, and it's taken 20 years. The sustainability and circular fashion industry is taking over 30 years. Like, innovation and change takes time to integrate our mainstream culture, let's say. And sometimes I think about this with the perspective of like, growth and sustainability are in conflict, right? If we want to grow, make it more accessible, it's a conflict because it's not sustainable.
I was
So
just going to say that because Marina mentioned all the dead stock that there is, all the fabric that there is already produced, and there's no need to produce more. But then there's the other layer, because you want to scale it because you're a brand, and you need to scale it because you need profit so that the machine can still go on the previous terms. So it's really hard for a brand to introduce this kind of new lines or new takes on anything, because the model is the one that should not be be replicated as it is right now. So it actually, and it's one of the biggest conclusions, is that we really need to change collectively our way of thinking, that style needs new purchase or new acquisitions all the time. The urge to buy is really something that is present in our lives, and it's actually about a personal connection, because when you decided that you would wear yellow for 2 months and you would borrow clothes from other people, you needed to establish those connections. Buying, especially online, really is a bypass. You can just order it online, one click, it's done, it arrives at your door, and you don't need to interact with anyone. So there's also an automation on so many levels that we just don't realize, because we are naturalizing all of these behaviors instead of changing them. So scaling is one of the problems. Integrating better practices is another one. So how do you see it in terms of business? Um, are business owners and great fashion groups really willing to change and issuing less, for instance?
I mean, it's such a complicated just because like we're in the fashion industry, we're not saving lives.
Yeah, we know.
We are, I mean, we're all kind of in this space where we're doing better within the fashion industry. We're educating, we're trying to find solutions, and try to make it more conscious. But we don't need fashion. We don't need more clothes. We don't need another jacket. We don't need it. But the industry exists. It's a huge industry, and it's an industry that makes a difference that a lot of people look up to. So Kim Kardashian is wearing something, all these people are going to follow her. So although we're not changing much, we do have an impact, and the industry has an impact. And so many people look up to the industry that if we try to make it better, or educate through this industry, it will get to a mass. It will get to other people. But I don't really know how to answer. Companies gonna want to make less money? No.
Yeah,
But
I guess that's one of the biggest barriers. Profit is always a problem.
I mean, it's changing, right? I mean, with the intensity of oncoming EU legislation, brands are going to have to report environmental and social impacts. If they don't, they're going to get fined for it. So the more, legislation, and policy is driving this accessibility, the more brands are going to be forced to do this. And, European brands are more and more, they're going to be the first ones
To
on
change.
the line to change this because they have to. But American brands or US brands, and just take this into account, for example, US brands are only 25% to 30% of the US luxury brands are only 25 to 30% of the US market sales. So that means not only does the US have a massive influx of European brands that sell into here, they're not going to change their policies just because they're selling into the US, because they produce in particular places. But again, if US brands want to sell into or do sell into the European market, because it's a strong market too, they have to adhere to EU legislation. So thank God the EU is pushing these policies forward, and hopefully in a few years, in 4+ years, we'll be able to follow suit in the US. But this to say, I think not only are consumers driving this need, but I do see with the brands that I work with daily in my line of business, that it's not, at least from how I present the products that I sell to them, it's not about price, because sustainable fabric and fibers and manufacturing can be comparable in terms of pricing to other luxury goods or luxury production. So it's really a matter of, is it what the brand is driving as a communication or as a target or as a essence of the brand, even if they don't speak of it, or is it not? Is it not something that they have time to develop internally? So once things start falling into place and it becomes something that you can't not do, I think that's when the switch is going to really happen. And what Marina is doing right now makes the entire difference, because once it becomes cool to be sustainable, once it becomes trendy properly, there will be no question about it.
There's a lot of young people. Oh, you young people! I'm an old woman already. There's a lot of there's a lot of young people communicating sustainability in such a fun and approachable way. In so many ways, just as Kaleigh was mentioning earlier on our conversation, I guess it was your greatest moment, an amazing debut. Thank you so much for that. Saying that sustainability can be a lot of things, and it can also be a matter of consciousness, and how are you going to wear the piece, and what are you going to do with it after you wear it 1,000 times. So and as you were both mentioning, do you think that younger generations have the power to communicate? It's more about an ethical behavior than anything else towards the consumer, like peer to peer, consumer to consumer. Because if you're a young girl with a great community online, say on Instagram or TikTok, and you are approaching fashion in a very fun and quirky way, and you are only sporting out like amazing vintage clothing or secondhand, or even just thrifting in a very fun way, do you think it can be a very powerful tool?
I mean, I definitely, as I mentioned, like the fashion industry has so many people follow the fashion industry, the same as the sport industry. Like it drives so many people that if we are able to make it cool, if sustainable fashion becomes a trend, it is going to change the mindset. And obviously, there's so many young people today really driving that message. But I also think it's really important, the educational part of it, because we're not doing sustainability. Let's save the planet. We're also being more conscious, because do we really want petroleum touching our skin? Do we really want toxic dyes? Do we want all these like horrible chemicals in contact with our skin? So I think like Positive Materials is an amazing, what they're doing is really bringing to light these amazing alternative and technologies and new textiles that are sustainable for the planet, but also for our health. And once people are aware that it's not only save the planet thing, it's my
Save
health,
yourself.
it's affecting me. Yeah. So I think there has to be a lot of communication and education around that, because people don't really, they're like, oh no, I want this and I want that. But like, okay, well, if that's going to cause you cancer, or if that's going to cause this, do you really want it? Or do you want to go with a more conscious option and really spend the money on a natural material, a biodegradable material, something that has, no toxins? So I think that's a conversation and an educational part that hasn't really entered the conversation, uh, but really has to be pushed, because it will be something that changes the mindset of people that don't want to switch.
Absolutely. I was going to add that also. Once you start understanding, just like organic food is mainstream today, once you start understanding the impact of polyester on your skin, the impact of dyes and finishes depending on where they were made and how they were treated, because it's not only harming our environment through what we already know and have learned over the past 2 decades, whether it's from Al Gore's first movie on the topic and where this kind of opened it to the world, but to today. And we know now, like Marina and I, through our colleagues, that more and more of this content is going to be pushed out, because there's more and more scientific evidence of the impact, not only on as you say, future probable health problems, but on our endocrine system. So it's really something that will start and hopefully be pushed out so that everyone can understand where to go, and in consequence push brands to be more transparent about what they're actually doing, right? Because I mean, even if you choose an organic fabric, if it's been dyed and finished in dyes that weren't properly certified or etc., that can also mean that it's a faux pas.
It's not going to work out because there's
exactly.
there's always something missing. There's a question here that we have on our list of questions, and it is dressing a need or a want, or is it a fashion a need or a want? And I live this question here with a little provocation, because working in an industry that really wants to feel fresh and renewed all the time, I myself have to struggle every time I want to wear the same outfit for another event, and am forced to wear a new one, for instance. And every time I say that, well, I like this shirt, why can I not use this shirt? Why do I need to wear a new one? Why do I need to keep on feeding that? Um, do you think that it will eventually change? Every time we individually reject another outfit change.
Sounds like we need to spread the yellow like a lemon.
We need to do it globally, Marina.
I actually did an activation tackling this question.
Oh, great.
So I entered the fashion industry modeling. I started modeling just to finance a clothing brand that I wanted to start. And I had my family's all in the art and fashion. So I had been around the industry, but not in the aspect as a model. And I remember just the first fashion week in New York Fashion Week as a model, my agent just sent me to 3 different events at night. Each event, I had to change clothes because the client wanted me to wear their clothes. And I spent the whole night in a taxi going home and changing clothes. But on social media, it just felt like, wow, she's here, she met this person, she has this dress, this, and whatever. And I woke up and I realized I'm just another voice playing the same game as everyone else and talking as if this was a great experience and a great night. And I own these things and I don't own anything. I didn't drink. I didn't have dinner. I just ran around from one thing to another. And that really inspired me to use my platform and talk about, okay, this can't happen. We can't be promoting having all this stuff that we don't even have. So people outside of the industry want to be part of the industry and have to pursue.
And then want to buy and then feel pressured to
fit
the acquisition.
in and to be part of it. So I created a campaign called One Dress to Impress. And I wore a red suit every day for 2 months. This was my first campaign ever. To go against the taboo of repeating outfits, to go against the growth of fast fashion, to go against this mindset that as a woman, you need to look different every time. You need to be perfect, have something different, can't repeat an outfit because it's not cool. And also to showcase that I'm part of the fashion industry. And just because I repeat an outfit, I'm not going to be banned. I'm not going to be kicked out. So I did this campaign, wore this red suit every day, styled it differently, and went to everything, went to events, went to parties, went to fashion shows, traveled, and really showcasing look, you can repeat the same thing and just style it differently. At the end of the day, fashion is your own creativity and what you want to do and what looks good on you, what fits good on you, and what makes you feel good. Because I think we lose this idea that, oh, the trend is pink, so now I want to wear pink. but you don't look good in pink, or you don't, or whatever. So it's
That
this idea,
just doesn't fit you. Just
and
stop it.
And a lot of people just go into trends without even liking it or feeling good in them, and that's not it. So
yeah. Kaleigh, do you want to add something?
I think this was perfect. That was amazing and inspiring.
So thank you very much. I don't think we have much more time because our episodes are supposed to be very short. But thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. And, now em português I'll switch. Foi o nosso episódio das conversas fora de moda sobre moda sustentável com Marina Testino e Kaleigh Tirone. O meu nome é Joana Barrios e até ao próximo episódio das conversas fora de moda.
Hoje ficamos por aqui nas Conversas Fora de Moda, o podcast do Beat. Com o apoio do PRR e da Next Generation EU, estamos a mudar o mundo através da bioeconomia no têxtil e vestuário. Da natureza de forma circular e sustentável para as pessoas. Fica a par de tudo nas redes sociais do Beat.